Welcome to the Not Good Podcast, presented by Sky High Media, LLC, with your hosts, David Jane and Timothy Worrells. Views and opinions of the Not Good Podcast are not necessarily that of Sky High Media, LLC.
Welcome to this episode of the Not Good Podcast. This is David Jane, joined by
Mickey Bryle.
All right, and we had some technical difficulties earlier trying to figure some stuff out, but we have worked together before.
We have, until you jump ship.
And it's been a while, and I still feel bad about it when you bring it up. So.
And you should. Good.
So today's episode I wanted to talk about, and we each have experience with kind of each thing, but young versus old, and not necessarily just about age or just about the church. But we're going to first talk about young versus old in terms of children. I was going through kind of just issues we talk about, probably about a year ago, 2 years ago maybe, when all that, maybe 3 years. Anyway, but just issues that I had as a dad that maybe I thought I needed to be more or less one way or the other, but kind of the key when you're a parent to a younger child is consistency, and I was probably being too consistent for the wrong reasons. And one thing that you kind of spoke into us was that you shepherd their heart. You don't necessarily correct or make them bend to your will, because you're the steward of this child, and that's what it's about, is that you've been given stewardship of this child, and you are to shepherd their heart in the right direction so that they're sensitive to the call of God on their life.
Right.
And the other thing I remember you saying was that problems don't disappear when they get older. They just get more complex.
More complex, a bigger deal, failure to put up your toys at 5 is an issue in the moment, but then it goes to how fast are they driving? Who are they driving with, or who are they riding with? And the issues change. They're all stressful. And none of them are fun, but it's parenting, it's change. They grow, hopefully you grow, but yeah, it's all a challenge for sure.
Yeah. The other thing that, talking about younger versus older, when my pastor now, one thing my pastor now said was that if you want to spend time with them when they're younger, they'll want to spend time with you when they're older. And they just have a really cool relationship. They have 4 kids. The oldest one's married. Her and her husband are missionaries. Then second one's, her and her husband are in ministry. Next one's a nurse. Next one's in college. And so they all have just great I guess, family energy, because they all, when they're together, they want to be around each other. And they'll, like, one time I remember asking him, because him and his, I guess, two kids were in town and they're staying here, but then they went to the church just to say bye before they went and did something. And I was like, man, that's just really cool that, your kids want to just say bye to you before they leave. Like, they're adults and they don't have to do that. And I asked him, and then I asked his wife, and they both said the same thing, that they were like, if you're interested in what they're interested in when they're younger, then they'll be interested in the things you're interested in when they're older. And it just goes to show, like, the time you spend with them now, not just disciplining them, but playing with them and playing imaginary whatever, when they're little, they'll want to maybe listen to what you have to say when you talk about money when they're older.
Right. And I do. And I think I agree with all that. I think that's very true. And I think you cultivate that, from a very young age all the way through. I think kids who feel that home with mom and dad is a secure base for them, they will want to be there. We all want to be in a place with people where we feel good, where we feel secure, where we feel we can be real, honest, kind of thing. And I think kids pick up on that at a young age. I think they know when they're genuinely wanted versus tolerated, and I think, and there's definitely a phase where, it's like we do tolerate. Diapers we tolerate, the tantrum, sometimes we just tolerate some things, but I think it comes back to relationship. They've got to know that I am loved unconditionally. And I try to tell my kids regularly, you're loved always and forever, no matter what. And I've been saying that since they were, could hear me, And I just think people want to be where they're wanted. And I think, when parents, they pawn the kid off or, in daycare 12 hours a day and then with a babysitter at night. And I don't know, I think kids pick up on that. And I can't remember the exact studies that have been done, but there have been studies, on that. Kids who become good kids as adults, they're active, involved, they come home, they care, they look after the aging parent. And there's a trail there that comes back. They felt, that secure base, that attention when they were younger.
What are some of the benefits, do you think? Because right now I feel like I have a 6 and a 2-year-old, it's like they enjoy playing with you. But as an adult with, almost adult kids, what do you think like the best pros are?
For the little ones?
No. For yours. Like, what is the...
Oh, yeah. See, I've told you before, I enjoyed this phase. I was a youth director, so the teenage years, I am much better with that than I was diapers and pacifiers and car seats and all that. That really drove me nuts. But you have to be involved in that season so you can get to have a relationship in the next season. And I think each season builds on the other, and hopefully the season we're in now as parents with 16 and 20, hopefully that foundation is pretty strong that when they're, 26 and 30, that, hey, dad does care. Dad does know a little something, that comes back around too, I think. So I think, for me, I always tried to enjoy whatever season we're in, I didn't like, the feeding and all that, but I did like to see them smile. I was just a parent, to see them have fun, to see them enjoy the new toy or whatever, Find what you do enjoy in each season. And I think kids pick up on that. I think they know when dad is genuinely having fun with them, when he's just being tolerant, And I think we have to be careful that it's not all about discipline, not all about no fun and bringing down the rod and all that, because, rules, I think it's Dobson who says rules without relationship will equal rebellion, like every time. And I think there's some truth to that.
We just recently, Morgan's done this before, but this was my first time where I told them, if you behave, we'll do this fun thing. And then it was, we're going to get donuts. And so it was like this past Saturday. I had them, Morgan had an appointment. But, so we went, both of them, we went to the chiropractor, and that was for me. And then they were good, so we went and got donuts. And then on the way home, we were going to eat them when we got home, but technically one of them did something that they should have probably not had a donut. And so instead of following through with that, I was like, hey, Lila, let's talk about grace. And I was like, we don't deserve to, be in heaven with God. But because we don't deserve it, he decided to, have a relationship with us and do his work on the cross. And so because we didn't deserve it, he decided that he wanted to give it to us anyway. Right. And so just like we probably shouldn't be eating this donut right now, that's what you're going to do. This is God's grace, in a donut.
Yeah, because, I don't know, I can't remember who told me this, but I know that kids, their first view or their first understanding of God as a father usually comes from the parent, from the dad. And I know Dobson has done studies, this was years ago, but, kids who have a godly father, that's one thing, but a kid who has a godly father who has the attributes of God in the home, like love and grace, those kids, their view of God is like always positive, always positive. And kids who don't have a dad, or he's inactive, or, a bad example, that's their view of God, So I've told a lot of young parents, your kid's first view, understanding of God is going to be in you, and especially the dad, So, but yeah, that's cool.
I can see why people, end up out of church when they've been brought up a certain way and it's just kind of stale or inconsistent. And they're like, well, why, if I don't even know what God's going to do,
right?
Or if I don't even know what my dad's going to do, how would I, God is just, up there looking down at us and who knows what's going on. And they have a kind of perverted view of what God is just because of a inconsistent father or an absent father.
Or he doesn't care.
Yeah.
And we're constantly referring to God as Father, Abba, Daddy, And if those words are not positive for you, then that reflects back on God, even though it's not true. It's just human nature, We associate, word association, just the way it works. So it is, it's very important that they see that, experience that.
So then the next topic, there's 3 phases of young versus old I want to talk about today. And this was the kids portion. The next is the church portion. And this is probably the more fun one that we're going to talk about. So young churches versus old churches. And we have both been a part of old churches. Have you ever been a part of like a new church that's just started in the last 10 years?
No.
Okay.
No.
Enough people that I've talked to somewhat have a bearing on that, and it's pretty much you're going to face problems either way. It's just what types of problems you face.
Right.
So we can speak to the old churches.
Yeah. Old churches, and there's positive. I've been in both, as far as where the congregation was predominantly older and predominantly younger. I've had both. Both were and have been pleasant experiences. There's things I have learned from both. And there are pros and cons to both. I mean, it is, when you have a mature congregation, both in age and even in their faith walk, it's different. Different challenges, but it is different. It is, stability, the foundation is there. We've talked about the money is typically there. So that's good. But we are called, to reach the next generation and young people and lost people and all that. And then that's where it can get tricky, because just because we get older, and even though we are changing on the outside, we tend not to change on the inside as far as belief systems and methods and all of that. And it has an effect.
Let's talk about the money. Do you have any insight as a pastor why older people are better at giving than younger people?
50 years ago, I would say maybe at least longer, churches were typically, especially in the South, they were the center of community. They took precedence over theaters, skating rinks, bowling alleys, all of that. Social life, cultural life typically revolved around the church, especially in the Bible Belt. And so when that is the center, and I can't remember where I read this, but anyway, you're more involved, it's a priority, And after World War II, there was a strong emphasis among evangelicals. We got to reach people. This could prevent a future war. And so there was a drive that, people really do need Jesus, And so if you really believe that, you give to make that happen, Well, I want to see my neighbor saved, I want to see the people who hate Jews, I want to see them come to Christ, or all that, And so it was a driving force. And if you look, many of the big buildings, church buildings, were built between like 1950 and 1977. They were just nice buildings, the stained glass, all of these cathedral-looking buildings, because the money was there. It's because people believed in it and they gave. And then, but that wasn't passed down. I think that culture, they enjoyed it. And I think there may have been a little bit of pride there. Look what we've accomplished, what we've done. I heard one preacher say one time, it's almost the Tower of Babel mentality. Look what we can do. And I don't think it was intentional, but I think through the years, the goal, the Great Commission of the church got lost in the packaging and in, this is about me. And so I don't know, but that's part of it. They were raised differently, definitely there was a more dependence upon God during, when you're a nation at war, there's more dependence upon God. We've definitely become self-sufficient. Economically, people are doing better. They have more toys. And so everything gets a priority, a different, well, there's money for this and money for ball. And we have lost our love and our commitment to see people really encounter Christ. We're going so many different directions, not just in life, but also with our money, we're spreading it out. So I think that's part of it, and I believe this now for years. If I really believe that somebody I know and love may miss heaven, I will do whatever it takes to help them see to help their divinity, if I really believe that, including giving, including missionaries, including the local church, and all that. I think part of we've lost that burden that, there really are people who don't know God, kind of thing. So that's a chunk of it.
There is a resistance also, I think, in older churches to change too. And I'm sure there's plenty older churches that are doing everything the right way. So I don't want to speak universally, and this is on my mind, we've just kind of talked about as a staff here, characteristics of dying churches. And one of them is a anger or a resistance to change. Why do you think, and this is something that I ask almost everybody, but why do you think that there's that resistance to want to make things look newer or to change the music or to...
A lot of it's ownership. If you have a generational church where they have been there second, third generation, there is a sense of, I own this. This is my church. And that can be good, But if something that I have, if you come in my house and say, I want to change the color of the paint or the carpet in my house, that's offensive to me. If you say, I don't like it, I don't like your color choice, your decor, whatever, that's offensive. And it really works the same way in the church. People who have ownership or feel like they have ownership, and that, again, that's not always negative, but when it becomes mine and you try to change what is mine, I'm offended, or tell me you don't like the way I do it, or the way I've been doing it is wrong, or there's a better way to cook, or whatever, that becomes offensive. So ownership can be good, like God has entrusted me to be a part of this local body. That's good. But if my ownership, my grip is so tight that I won't let somebody else come in or don't want anybody else to be a part, because some of it's fear. If I let go of my control, or we stop doing things the way I like them, then I may lose ownership. Mm-hmm. What if the majority of the people start liking things this way and my voice doesn't count, my voice doesn't matter? And this doesn't happen overnight. This has been building for generations. Generational churches are cool, and they can do a great work, and they typically have the resources. But in my experience has been, they tend to lose sight of the Great Commission. Mm-hmm. That this is more important than me getting my way.
A couple episodes ago, I compared it to a 401k, how people have contributed and watched it grow. And then they want to choose what happens with it too. So it's weird when they're like, well, I kind of like the walls this beige color, and I kind of like the shaggy green carpet, and I kind of like the golden chandeliers that are hanging. And
right. And it comes back to the purpose. What is the purpose? What's the purpose of the 401k? Well, that's for future retirement. Cool. Do with it, But even in that, if a financial advisor says, hey, if you would start investing over here, you have the potential to double your money. I mean, it is just wise common sense to say, okay, well, I would at least try that.
Yeah.
And it would be the same in the church, Nobody likes change. And, the older I get, I think the less I like change on almost everything. But what is the purpose? Okay, the purpose is, in the church, we are to reach people who are far from God. Well, what does that look like? Well, I think in every community it's different. Every nation is probably different. But I think, at some point there's got to be an honest conversation, is the way we're doing it now, is it working? Are we seeing people saved? Are we seeing lives being changed? And if we're not, then okay, let's maybe change financial advisors. Let's maybe change who we're getting advice from, who we're listening to. And if there's a better way to reach more people, to fill heaven, then we have to be willing to look at that. But again, we've talked before, part of that is a heart issue, and being ready or willing to sacrifice what I want, what I like, to reach somebody else. If I'm not willing to do that, then it's ultimately, okay, God, do a work in me. I'm not thinking straight on this. But.
Hearing, I won't say this is happening where I'm at, but I also won't say it's not. But hearing things that we've done it, this church started in 1959, and there are plenty of things that we're doing because we did them 30 years ago, 50 years ago, whatever. And now is where it gets to where I can't say if it's happening here or not, but it very possibly is one of those things that we still do this because we've always done it. And then when you look at what's happening and, oh, well, we just need this simple solution, we just need the thing, instead of we need to look at why we're doing it. And we're talking a lot, I guess, we're talking a lot now as a staff and about why we do stuff and what the Bible actually says a church should be. And when you kind of throw that out there, people get defensive of, well, what do we need to change? What do we need to do? What are you proposing we take away, or what are you proposing that we add? And then it's just the reason why we do it, and a phrase that's been thrown around: the message stays the same, but the methods change. And we see that even in door-to-door visitation. I feel like if we went out and went to a really nice apartment complex where there's a bunch of Gen Z, kids renting because they don't want to buy,
Right.
and you knocked on the door, you would probably be on the other end of a Ring notification app, and then they would not answer if you weren't Amazon.
Right.
Know.
I think some tradition is good. I always brush my teeth. That is a very traditional personal hygiene thing because it works. It's proven that it works. But recording my favorite TV show on a VCR, do you even know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a VCR. I no longer do that because it's no longer effective. It doesn't make sense because there's a better way, to watch my favorite show, to do things. And I think the church has to acknowledge that. Is preaching the Bible traditional? Absolutely. They've been doing it since, Acts. That's good. That shouldn't change. But our culture has changed. American church culture has not changed fast enough with our culture. People, they're not churched. We have dealt with even in our kids and youth program, kids who don't know what John 3:16 is. They think it's that wrestler, kind of thing. And so they don't know. And so you can't, the way we did church, 20 years ago is not going to reach that crowd. And so it comes down to, what am I, as a believer, as a discipled, mature Christian, what am I willing to give up, sacrifice, change, so that those kids can at least have a chance to experience what life in Christ is all about, But a lot of it's a heart issue. And we can't change hearts, but I think, I do believe this in every local church, that God still has his hand on, that he has not written Ichabod across the door. I think he has a plan for. And I think there's a remnant even in the local church, even in a traditional church, even sometimes a liberal church. There could be a remnant in there that God is saying, if you want to be a part of a new thing, you can be. I think it's, I told you today, I think finding those people is key. You got to know, okay, God, who in this local body, who were you at work in? Anyway, a little bit off subject, but.
So transitioning, let's see, we talked about young versus old churches, now like people. And we've kind of inadvertently, I guess, talked a little bit about younger people versus older people, but in the church you're at now, you hinted at the demographic, but what would you say it is?
We're like it, the ones we just did, we're like it, 47% of our congregation is 25 and under.
Wow.
And it's very cool. It's cool to see that. And I know there are pastors all over the world, country, who are like, oh, I'd love it if half my church was that young and vibrant. And the music is a whole different feel when they're that young and they're singing and they care and all that. That's very cool. And of course the giving, that makes that part of it tricky. And then then we've got another probably 30-40% between 25 and 40, and then there's about 25 people 50 and up, which is very cool. And they're fun to preach to. They're fun to worship with. New Christians. Every story is new. And that's all very cool. It's also a challenge. Making disciples out of young people is also more of a challenge than ever before because, again, culture has changed. Culture is not working with us. They're not helping. They're fighting it. They're fighting that part of life. So.
Are there any So other than money, which we've talked about a couple times, what would you say another problem is of a maybe generationally younger church?
For me, it has been the wisdom, some of the wisdom that you get just by being older. Number one, life lessons. They're not there yet, which does create a little bit of a void when it comes to leadership, teachers, deacons, that kind of thing. It leaves a void there because you don't have that. Typically, I've always been where it was like 80-20. You had 80% who were mature and older, and 20% who were, under the 35 bracket. So it is a different, it's a different. That's one of them, is leadership and wisdom, and just overall stability. When you're young, that's challenging in and of itself. Then you're a new Christian, new to the faith, all of these questions and things you don't understand, things that you think don't make sense that you've read. I mean, all that is, it's challenging. Both sides have, there's, a lot of challenge on both ends of that spectrum for sure.
Have you had any graduate, I'm trying to think in the time that I've not been there, but have you had any graduate and stay around so they become a part of the congregation age, like 18, 19, 20, 21, that don't go to college and don't go away, but just kind of stay around?
We do. The young adult group is very vibrant. It's volunteers, led by volunteers, and, they have a room full on Sunday morning. And, I don't know, time will tell. We've had some who've gone to college and come back who are there, at least a couple that I can think of off the top of my head. Those who didn't go to college and who have graduated, I'm not sure what our percentage is right now, but it's decent. We've by no means statistically lost everybody. It's not like they're graduating youth group and never coming back. Mm-hmm. There's been some of that, obviously, but I wouldn't say by any means the majority.
So I would just want you to go ahead and rehash the story that we talked about earlier, but you mentioned the guy in our area that had you speak, and then you said one thing, and then after a period of time, can you go ahead and tell that story? Because I think that's important when you talk about young versus old.
Yeah, all glory to God, but our church has done well in spite of everything. The pastor, the staff, the lack of resource has done very well. And so I've been asked a time or two to share, how did this happen? There are lots of smaller dying churches, and so, and I used to say, well, just the blessing of God. And then I really, thought about that, and there are a lot of pastors, who are praying and who are godly and who love Jesus and who are praying night and day and fasting for the church and all that. And it's not happening. They're not seeing change. They're not seeing new people, new converts. And so I've stopped saying, oh, it's the blessing of God, though ultimately it is. But I think God gives us a roadmap, but he kind of lets us pick the car, and I think for us, the car has been, some key people. When our youth group first was started this particular time, there were a couple of kids, 3 kids who really got it one year at camp, and it wasn't just, Christian camp, 1 week religion. It was life changing. And they go to school and they share it, and they're bringing people, and it just explodes from there. And I think that's true of youth. I think if you can get a couple of kids who get it, it's genuine. It is, the seed is deep. It's been planted. It's growing, bearing fruit. You don't need the whole youth group. And the same with adults. I don't feel like the whole church has to change or the whole church has to get on board. That rarely happened. Even in the beginning of the church, there were issues right out of the gate, And so I don't think everybody has to get it. But for me, pastoring now, and I learned this very late, but it's okay, if I can, whoever, God, the reason that I'm here, the 2 or 3 families or the 2 people or the one guy who really gets it, who knows, okay, we need to be reaching our community for Christ, and I am willing to do anything to see that happen, then find those people. Young people, if they're young, so be it. If they're in their 70s, so be it. I've seen it go both ways. But find the people who really want it. And that's who should get our time as church leaders, church staff, pastors, you name it, because that's God can work in and through somebody like that, who really wants to see it change. And those people typically are willing to do anything to see it happen,
Would you say that there was intentional investment into those people? Or did it just kind of happen?
No, there was once they got it, there was definitely intentional investment by the youth director, and it worked. I mean, there was fruit, and we have. There are adults in our church now. Even the leaders of the young college age, they came because of one of those youth who really got it and came back to school, and it was life change, not just for a week or two, but throughout, and they're still serving God. They're out of college and they're still serving God.
Just for context, because that happened when I was in Alabama, I would say. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, so for context, there was 8 people in the youth group when I left.
Right.
I was newly married, 5 months, and I had been at Faith with you for 3 or 4, but then before that for 2 or 3 years. So I left and the youth group had 8 people. And then when I came back a year and a half later, thankfully you hired me back. But the youth group had 60 people in it.
Right.
And then it only got bigger from there. And I remember maybe it was 80 or so people on a Wednesday night when during school, when all the routines are the same, and that was, I forget what the number is, whatever percentage per 100 people in your church, that's about what the youth should be, but it was 2 and 3 times what a normal youth group should be.
Per capita, we have the largest children's and youth of anybody around. Okay, per capita. And that's great. And I told you that they didn't come because of the music. It was, believe it or not, was not as good during that year. But we do not have a gym. We don't have facilities. We don't have resources. We can't do a pizza party every week. There's not money for that. But so it happened as a result of those few who got it and shared it and genuinely shared it. And then honestly, once a church or a youth group, whatever, starts growing, then it tends to just snowball. It just kind of happens, which is a cool thing.
And then y'all had an interesting problem since COVID, was that when the church, we closed down and did our thing online for a while like everyone else, and then when we started back, the adults couldn't meet on Wednesday nights because the youth between K and 12 was about 120 people.
Right. Yeah.
Once everything got fired up again.
Yeah. And because of the size between the youth group and children and the adults the manpower it takes to make all that happen, it filled everything up, it just filled everything up, which is very cool. But again, I don't, whoever hears this, it's I used to think there's a formula, that, you go to these church growth seminars, and I've been to them. I have read the books, I've done all that. But the only thing that I have found that has worked consistently is you find the people that get it, or who want to get it, who are willing to do whatever it takes to understand what does it mean to share the gospel, what does it mean to be a church alive. You find those people, and God can use them. Even if it's a kid. What?
Discipling.
Yeah, discipling. And for us, it wasn't adults. This did not start with adults. It started with 3 high schoolers, 9th graders, I think, at the time. And it was girls. It wasn't like it was the captain of the football team or anything like that. It was just 3 young ladies who go to camp, and you know, and God does the work in their heart, and then it spreads from there. And then it went, in our case, it went from the youth group to the church, you know.
Parents would come to see what their kids were doing.
Parents would come as a result, you know, some just to see, you know, is this a cult, you know, or what was going on. And, you know, and kids would ask to go. And then the youth director would encourage Sunday school, just like he did Wednesday night, which also helped. And then, eventually, I mean, our growth came from this. I mean, very few of our people just rode by and thought, I'll just go there. That's happened a little recently, but our presence in the community all goes back to the youth group and, you know, those kids who stayed the course and helped see it happen. So, but again, it wasn't the adults. Whole church didn't get it. We still have people who don't like it, who come one Sunday, never come back. We do not retain every visitor, and I've had people tell me, you know, you or this church is just not my thing. But overall, as far as reaching unchurched people, you know, thank God, has done very well.
That reminds me of like Tim, who is normally on here, and just for reference, he's on paternity leave because he's expecting just for the viewer out there who misses Tim, he is on paternity leave. He has hopefully had a baby by the time this comes out. Well, not him, but his wife. That would be weird, but actually it might not be weird anymore. But yes, he will hopefully have had a baby, but we will miss him in the coming, and this is his second one, so he gets to make that transition as well. All right, so, oh man, what were we talking about just a second ago?
Church, age difference.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to ask again, so one of the things I feel like I remember us talking about was basically old church problems is things changing, I feel like, and resistance to do this, and why can't this group of people just conform to what we're already doing as opposed to changing what we're already doing to conform to this group of people, which is, you know, maybe which one. There's probably one that's more biblical than the other, and I won't say which one, but I think the thing that stuck out to me the most was that the problems that, and while it wasn't a generationally old church while it wasn't a generationally old church, it was a demographically young church that Faith is. Mm-hmm. Yours. And there were just, I guess, issues that you kind of faced, and it wasn't so much a resistance to change. It was like literally discipling new believers, and kind of problems that were like seemed obvious to someone who'd been a Christian for a long enough time. But, you know, can you just talk a little bit about that?
This is just an example, you know, and I think this happened when you were there, but there was this young adult, 18-year-old. He's just started coming. He, I think, had just accepted Christ. He's on the front row. I'm on the front row. They're taking the offering. And he looks over at me and says, "What do you do with all that money?" You know, and he was serious. He was not cracking a joke. He was just like, what really happens? And so that information that, okay, this goes to help other people who are like you, who didn't know Christ. There's a place and all that. But it's things like that that they don't give. And that is a challenge because you don't learn that overnight. The importance of prayer and talking to somebody you can't see and even always feel. I mean, these are weird concepts. I mean, this whole Christianity thing is very weird, what we believe and all that. And getting that, helping people understand that and want to grow in that themselves. I mean, that's as much of a challenge I have seen as getting another generation to change their traditions. Both are very challenging. One is more fun. One is more fun. But yeah, it's an equal challenge. For sure.
I know it's kind of interesting. Our pastor had mentioned that when he started here, there was something to be said about hiring someone who's used to planning churches, hiring them as the pastor for a church that's been around 60 plus years, because of the problems, and maybe not necessarily the problems, but the things that need to change that everyone doesn't want to change. And to someone has the, I guess we'll say, pro of starting something from scratch, there will be something in 10 years that you might have an issue with, and some problems that you'll have to work out, and maybe some growth, some money, whatever it may be. But it's not going to be like, hey guys, maybe we shouldn't be doing this anymore because it's not biblical. Right. And then everyone's like, wait, what? Like, of course we're not going to change that. And then that's I think the hard-headedness of something that's been around for a long time. And it was just like, it reminds me of Blockbuster and Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon. People thought Jeff Bezos was an idiot for selling books online. And now they think he's an idiot because he's enjoying spending his billions of dollars. Right. And so which one would you rather be? If you don't innovate, you die. And that's not my quote, but literally, church-wise, if you don't innovate, you die. And we've just talked about, this will be a different episode, but our church is, our staff rather, is talking about symptoms of a dying church. And the first one is I referenced it earlier, but resistance to change, and why we're resistant to change. And we'll definitely talk about that on a future episode more in depth. But another thing we'll talk about more in depth on a future episode is our youth pastor and his wife reached out to different kids in different stages of going to church, not going to church, and who still go to this church, and why they don't go here anymore, why they continue to go here. And that feedback was interesting too. And a lot of it has to do with the mold that you have to fit into here because no one else is willing to change. And then at the same time, if you don't go here, then spiritually you just couldn't make it. Like, as if you couldn't reach the bar, when in reality it's flip-flopped. Like, people go because they need to be fed, right, and they're not being here. Yeah. I don't want to totally diss, the past 30 years. I mean, that's not what I'm doing, but people are leaving for a reason.
They do, and everybody's self-centered. People who, if the music or the preaching or whatever, verse by verse, methodical, topical, you name it. We all have our preferences. And I think what the church, mature Christians, have to ask themselves, is my preference fulfilling the Great Commission? Is anybody getting saved because I like a hymn or Southern Gospel or praise and worship or contemporary or whatever? I think we have to is that it? I think way too much emphasis is put on some of this stuff anyway. I don't think it's imperative either way. I think you can have a good heart no matter which your preferences are. I think we have to say, is it working? And is my personal preference keeping my kid, my grandkid from coming to know Christ, from being discipled, from walking with Christ, kind of thing.
And it really shouldn't be whether we sing 3 hymns or 3 contemporary songs. It should be what we're singing. And it shouldn't be whether the choir sings this week, or whether we have a choir,
right,
or whether we have a triple threat Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night.
Right. I think we have, it comes down to, is it pointing people to Jesus, or are people being saved or discipled, and I think it's not just about salvation, it's also about discipleship. But my experience has been, it's more people want a particular service at a particular time more out of legalism, tradition, that, oh, I love Jesus so much, I can't wait to get back and worship him again on Sunday night with God's people. That's rarely the mentality, you know. This is what we're supposed to do. It's the Lord's day, you know, but it's only those 2 hours, you know. And so there's all kinds of issues with that, but it comes back to the heart, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that is about everything, unless you can think of any, you know, further bombs of wisdom to drop on everybody. Young versus old, and not just age. You know, we talked about, just to recap, raising kids, and those problems get more complex, and just like problems get complex, same as with the age of churches. The older the church, the more complex the issues are. Not necessarily, but generally speaking, I guess. And then older versus younger in age of people that go to church, and just kind of everything. The focus should be to glorify God. We talk a lot about the mission of God. To accomplish the mission of God, you know, at Tim's church, they say we gather to scatter, and then we're sent. That's the Great Commission. That's what it's all about. Making disciples here, there, and everywhere. So yeah, we'll end it on that.
All right.
Hopefully we do another one here soon. But
thank you.
Sounds good. Oh yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. And just to remember, Tim, make the bell go ding ding as we get an episode drop, and never miss an episode when we drop it. And follow us, check us out on all the socials. The Not Good Podcast. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Not Good Podcast. Contact your host, David Jane, at davidj@skyhighmediallc.com.